Welcome to Insights to Activate, Ipsos' new content series focused on the topics that are shaping the business world today. We are thrilled to kick off this series with generative artificial intelligence, a topic that has taken the world by storm over the course of the last 2 years. My name is Ben Meyerson. I'm a director of marketing and communications here at Ipsos, and we have a great panel today who are here to share their insights on generative AI with experts from Adobe, Estee Lauder, New York University, and of course, from Ipsos. This is going to be based off of a report that we recently published, Generative AI from Wow to How, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. How to go from the wow of generative AI to the how you can use it to build your business today. Even since these tools burst onto the scene 2 years ago, there have been massive advancements. Look at this image on the left here. This is an early example of an image that was created with generative AI. And then look on the right here. This is an image that was created with the most modern tools available to create imagery. It really just goes to show not only how powerful these tools are, but how far they've come just in the short time since they captured the world's attention. Around the world, people recognize that AI is going to be important in their lives as well as the businesses that they interact with. Ipsos and Google recently did a poll of people in 17 countries asking the ways that they think that AI is going to be important. And you can see right at the top there, it's research and development. 85% of people around the world believe that AI is going to be important for these uses. Let's zoom in on that. 85% of people around the world and 80% of people in the US think that AI is going to be important for research and development. That means that they think that AI will be important to accelerate discovery, optimize experiments, help researchers collaborate, and automate some research tasks. These are uses that aren't just theoretical. These are ways that people are using AI today. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit through how some businesses are doing just that. One key thing to think about as you figure out the ways that AI can build your brand is that the robot can't do it alone. Here's a quote from our global chief operating officer, Michelle. It really gets to the core of AI's future capabilities, as well as just the way that you need to keep it grounded. Generative AI is like an exoskeleton. It can help you run faster, jump higher, or carry more weight, but it still needs a human inside. I love this. It just conjures up every sci-fi movie you've ever seen with a great robot suit. Take whichever way you want. But it really illustrates that AI can't do it alone. It really needs a person at the heart of it. And that is really the core of Ipsos's viewpoint, that you need artificial intelligence and human intelligence. So we've talked about the wow. Now let's get to the how. There are 3 key ways that we think that businesses can use generative artificial intelligence to scale their brand today. The first is ideation and creation. This is about using the speed and power of AI to come up with ideas or creative for concepts that you might otherwise have taken a lot more time to work on and get together. The second is testing and experimentation. This way is really about democratizing the use of data across your organization, making it easier and faster to test concepts and share that information across your organization in a really efficient way. And then the last is analyzing data. A lot of times when you get a big data set from folks, you've gone out and you've done a lot of focus groups, you've talked to a lot of people. If you've got really detailed answers, it can take a long time to sort through that. With AI, you can get that data back super fast and super efficient and get great new takeaways that otherwise might have taken a long time to get to or that you perhaps might have missed. Now let's move to our panel of experts. They're brilliant folks and leaders in their field who have gone from wow to how at their own companies or who are helping other folks do it. Let's meet our panel.
Jen Lee, I'm Director of Strategic Initiatives and Predictive Analytics at the Estee Lauder companies. And my role is primarily focused on bringing together marketing with AI to bring greater efficiencies and effectiveness for our business.
I'm Chris Duffy from Adobe, head of Gen Studio, our end-to-end platform that offers intelligence across the entire content supply chain.
I'm Nicole Alexander with NYU. I'm an adjunct professor of marketing and technology, focused on societal implications of technology.
Nice to meet you all. I'm Christy Click, and I'm a Senior Vice President, Senior Client Officer with Ipsos. I'm really delighted to be here today to speak about the various different Gen AI capabilities that we've developed. As a matter of fact, really elated that we've already had the opportunity to submit a presentation to the Insights Association and had the chance to actually speak about what we've done in the Gen AI space with Nestle Purina. So I'll be talking a bit about that today too.
That's fantastic. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with ideation and creation, that first bucket. Jen, How does AI help you accelerate the path from a concept to an in-market product at the Estee Lauder companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So using Gen AI for product innovation is one of our key use cases and one of the key areas that we think that value can be driven by Gen AI. And so, a little bit of context on Estee Lauder companies, if you're not as familiar, is we have over 20 brands, including, of course, Estee Lauder brand, but also other brands like Clinique, MAC, Jo Malone London, The Ordinary, and others. And we have a global presence. So our products are sold in over 150 countries. And, being a company that has been around for nearly 80 years and having that global scale, we have so much data. We have trend reports, we have consumer insights data, we have obviously our sales data. And so what Gen AI does amazingly is bring together all of those different data points in a way that can create new and unique insights for us. And ultimately, I think the real differentiator between Gen AI and how we've always looked at Gen AI and how we've looked at AI in the past, because we've been on this journey for many years and we've been investing in AI for many years, is that Gen AI really helps us to create those human-like outputs that can help us to scale even faster and stronger than before. And, I know you mentioned acceleration, but I think another thing that we are very much thinking about is how this technology can help us to better personalize our products. So be able to customize and make even more relevant based on real data and insights for our consumers. So one of the examples of projects that we're doing related to Gen AI is we are building a Gen AI concept development platform where it's being trained on, thousands of documents, including consumer insights, including ratings and reviews, including search data, much more than that. And it's actually helping us to generate new product concepts and also new activation ideas that can be used in different markets. So super exciting, because not only can we have this tool that's generating entirely new ideas that are original, that can be a springboard for our teams to work off of, but it also helps us to get to that next level of personalization that's data-driven and at scale.
How do you keep humans involved in that? So you've got the humans that's all based off of. Where do you take a look at that when the output comes back to you on your team?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, I'm glad you asked, because people are at the center of AI. Even though we keep talking about AI as this really exciting technology that can break down so many barriers that we've seen in the past and can really help us get to that next level, humans are central to that process. And the real power comes when you combine human intelligence with artificial intelligence. And without people being in the mix to train, develop, and also use those tools, you're not getting the full potential, the full value of any of the Gen AI tools that you're using.
Chris, you touch on this a lot with Adobe. Yeah. Obviously, so much of what Adobe is known for is the development of visual assets. How does Adobe fit into this ideation and creation?
Sure, as Jen highlighted, I think this really is the Promethean moment, not only for marketing, but the business world as a whole. If we take a step back, there's probably 3 or so big macroeconomic forces coming together and converging. The first one being the evolution of customer expectations. They want real-time, personalized experiences. The second one being technical disruption, as we're talking about today with Gen AI. There's a lot of advancements happening there. And then the third one being business transformation, the continuous need for growth in the business realm. All of that is bringing this new opportunity to really leverage Gen AI for personalized experiences. And I like to make a distinction between personalization and hyper-personalization. In the past, we used to do it by segmentation. We're now doing it by one-to-one capabilities. Mm-hmm. And I also like to make a distinction between transformation and business reinvention. Unlike previous technologies that came before, that were usually allocated maybe to the CTO or the CMO, possibly, it is now a contract with the entire C-suite because it is so foundational for business reinvention. With that understood, now companies have the capability to leverage Gen AI, as Jen highlighted, for one-to-one personalization at scale. And so at Adobe, we've been hard at work to create this end-to-end platform for the content supply chain. We call it Adobe Gen Studio. And I use that as a metaphor for the opportunities for businesses to leverage Gen AI. And essentially, that gives the capability to pull real-time insights from CDP data that then can trigger content creation at that one-to-one level, that then can trigger in near real-time multi-mix media modeling, that then can trigger optimization. And you have this flywheel of innovation and content creation.
Nikki, you've got a really interesting perspective here because you're on the academic side now with NYU, but you've previously been with Meta. How do you think that these AI models are evolving as we look into ideation and creation?
Absolutely. I think, one of the benefits to business is a lot of these models actually came out of academia, right? That's where a lot of the innovation, the R&D started. But one of the areas in particular that we looked at Meta was how to develop products and solutions that at the end of the day help the masses. And since I was on the B2B side, we really are concerned about small and medium businesses. So we've seen generative AI transform how SMBs are really able to go to market, particularly working on small, if no budgets whatsoever. Generative AI has allowed them to really step into the same playing field as enterprise. So the generative AI tools that we bring to small businesses in order to generate creative, to do testing and optimization, has really allowed them to come into the playing field without having some of these major creative agencies behind them, or to have massive content teams in-house, because they've leveraged generative AI in order to really do end-to-end marketing. We come in with being able, from a Meta perspective, we come in to allow them to reach a larger audience, as well as to understand and synthesize some of the information that's coming out of the campaigns that we're helping them to develop.
That's fascinating. Christy, we're doing some stuff with Ipsos right now. We're working on ideation and creation. We're launching some new tools. What can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. In fact, I think we've earned our #1 ranking in the Grit Report for being most innovative, because we have really leaned in a significant way. What I'd like to showcase for you are a couple of different examples from Qual and from Quant and from social research. So I'll start with Qual to start. So with our Qual practice, actually, they have created a whole suite of tools that are available to us. And as a matter of fact, we've had terrific experience with AI-boosted curation in the space of ideation. In fact, we've applied our Syncytium prompts to create personas, and then we're using these personas, so we have the who target in mind as we're actually ideating. This has allowed us to create very compelling, relevant, and meaningful concepts with the persona in mind. So that's one area for Qual. Quant, the innovation practice, has actually created a new suite of tools called InnoExplorer. The InnoExplorer is actually based on 45 years of innovation experience that we have, and millions of different data points. So we're actually enhancing models, and we're using those models for creating new ideas as well. So let me just talk you through this process really quickly, though. We'll start with fresh data, which we believe is really important. We'll do an assessment of what the unmet needs are. We then interact with Gen AI. Gen AI will help us to create ideas based on those unmet needs. We take that idea back into Gen AI that will help us with creating that concept. So it's a process that includes, as Jen mentioned, the human that's in the loop, as well as generative AI. And we have actually gone to about 39 different initiatives where we've tested them, and we have some really wonderful output from that experience. The third part that I really want to talk about is social. The Synthesio organization has created the Signals Gen AI platform. Within our platform, we have already updated the prompts so that we're able to provide an understanding of trends and market landscape and benefits and pain points. All of this has really been instrumental in guiding those researchers today in using those tools in order to create new product ideas. So overall, the marketplace certainly has transformed. The role of the Insights Manager has been one that where we're adopting that Gen AI, they're actually in a position where they can create and accelerate product launch even more quickly.
And I think what's really interesting too about all of these examples is for ideation and creation, Gen AI can show up in so many different ways. It can show up in insights chatbots or persona chatbots or content creation. And so I think as businesses think about how Gen AI can apply to their particular use case and how it's going to bring value for your business, what's really important is to think about like, what is the core of your business? Like I know for us at Estee Lauder Companies, as we think about any technology, including Gen AI, what's priority for us is understanding, is it going to support our enduring strengths? So that being high quality products and high touch consumer experiences. And if we see potential for value for that, that's when we'll decide to invest in a technology and find the right use case that can support those enduring strengths.
That's so fascinating. I'm really excited to hear about all the things that you all are doing across your businesses. Let's move on now to our second bucket, testing and experimentation. Chris, for many tasks, AI is simply faster than a human. But what other sorts of value does it bring to businesses? How do organizations harness AI's ability to spot emerging themes?
Sure, I think this gets to the heart of the theme of today, of going from wow to how. And so it's been wonderful to see the conversation mature and evolve from not only how does Gen AI be applied to tasks, but also how it can be applied to processes. So maybe we'll start with the latter in terms of applications within experimentation. I like to think of it in terms of two layers, the first being the technical and then the second being the process. In terms of the technology, we're starting to see a need for about a 20 to 25% investment in emerging technology within the IT budget. And so that's everything from new training models to new cloud services and so on. With that in place, you can then have the infrastructure ready for the experimentation from a process perspective. I think experimentation is really highlighting the need for experimentation so you can get to strategy. And so there's this old saying, strategy through experimentation, which is, I think, a nice rallying cry for today's environment. Once you get that in place, you can then start to do some more innovative things in terms of testing. We're starting to see a lot of bottoms-up marketing approaches. Back in the day when I was on the agency side, we used to go into research for many weeks or months and come up with a big idea and then cross our fingers and hope that would resonate. Now we're starting to see this volumetric approach where you can start to test in market that really provides the insight for these big halo campaigns. And I think that's really, again, underscores the power of Gen AI, because you can now create not only at scale, but it also affects the performance of the ultimate output. With that said, I would also like to offer that a lot of today's conversation is heavily focused on efficiency gains. As you brought up, it is really quite powerful in shaving off time to market or time to an idea. But I think the ultimate value prop of Gen AI is not only that, it's in combination of what can you do with all of that free time now. And so now you can apply those teams to do higher level thinking for new business growth, new product development, and so on. And so it's that combination of efficiencies for bottom line growth, but also top line growth opportunity.
I think that's so fascinating, especially to talk about as people discuss how this is going to change the workforce, the talk about the fact that folks are not going to be losing their jobs, but companies that are doing things really well are going to be shifting those people to another side of the coin where they get to work on a different side of things.
Yeah, and I think this panel is reflective of that. Maybe a few years ago, it would have been just marketers or creatives or just designers or technologists. But now what we're seeing with Gen AI, it's really compressing the gap between disciplines. It's going to be interesting over the next few months what the new operation model looks like and team structure. And I think that's still probably TBD, but there's some hypotheses where it's almost a flywheel of the team that stays together throughout the entire project. And at different points, at different tasks, there's a different team lead at those different intersections.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people are a bit weary or hesitant to adopt Gen AI. And rightfully so. It's been about a year and a half since it's been very much mainstream. But I do think the value and the power of Gen AI, it's going to help people who know how to use it and know how to use it effectively to be able to actually scale up, elevate, to your point, be able to do that higher level, more strategic thinking. And essentially Gen AI can be an extension of themselves and ultimately their team.
Maybe to that point, to address the 800-pound gorilla in the room of concerns around AI and responsibility and biases. Just to use Adobe as a reference, we were very thoughtful where we only trained on our own data. So that means anything that is generated is 100% indemnified. So I'd offer organizations that are using a new LLM to really look into how that data was trained and where it came from. The second aspect is we also offer custom training, which is a sandbox environment. And I think that's indicative of a newer trend emerging where you can combine these different LLMs. And so now organizations can have their own LLM that is training specifically on their content for a more personalized content as well. And then the third piece, which is really interesting, is a few years ago we started the Content Authenticity Initiative, the CIA for short, and it's comprised of around 3,000 or so companies across hardware, software, and media channels. And the hope with that is to add a greater level of transparency. I like to think of it as almost a nutritional label embedded into the generated content. We call it content credentials. But essentially now consumers can click on that piece of content and see how it was trained, how it was augmented, how it was distributed, and we're getting very close to seeing how it performed. And I think that's a really great extension of the value of Gen AI as well. I like to say we're moving from a society of trust then verify to verify then trust.
I think the discussion of responsibility is a really fascinating one. Nikki, you've done some research on that at NYU, right?
I have. So I think, it goes back to not just transparency, but accountability, right? So it's really, I love the fact that you mentioned sourcing, for instance. And I think that's one of the areas that, especially around generative AI and not necessarily having all the transparency when it comes to data sets or how LLMs were trained and what information went into them, having that sourcing allows you to really be able to see if the data was synthetic, if the data was something that was public domain or that there has copyright on, and then allows you to work appropriately off of that, especially if you're thinking about white space for ideation or experimenting in a new space around your portfolio. But I do think it's important as we think about accountability, it's not just showing where the data came from, but also how do you hold accountability to the organization if it's an LLM that you've paid for, if it's something that a company has built internally, to really have a feedback loop to continue to optimize, continue to manage those data sets, and to make sure that you have new data and diverse data coming in. We talked a little bit previously about bias, for instance, in data sets. And I have a unique perspective around that. It's, you can't just eliminate bias, right? Because that means you're eliminating a piece of humanity to a certain extent. So if you really want a human in the loop, you have to accept bias to a certain extent. You have to learn how to manage data sets based on the fact that they do have that bias. So how do you look at the outcomes that you're looking to focus on and make sure that the outcomes take into account the bias, but course correct for it so that you get to the right outcome for society as a whole.
Yeah, and I think acknowledging that journey is going to be iterative, right? It's not just going to be, hey, we solved the problem and now it's done, complete, wipe our hands of it. As these models are continuing to evolve, as we need to continue to train them, we need to constantly be looking at bias and making sure that we're managing it.
And the space is merging so quickly. We're talking a lot today about LLMs. Right around the corner are LAMs, large agent models. And then right after that is coming MALs, which is multi-agent learning models. And so I think we really have to take this moment, this pause to get things right, because because things are evolving very quickly from a technology standpoint. Just a little more context on the lambs and the malls, not to get too technical, but I think it's really interesting how we're going to really amplify personalization at speed very quickly. So the lambs are now accessing very personalized one-to-one data. And so I always reference my shoulder to think I'm going to, in the very near future, have multiple lambs on my shoulder, one for my health, one for my financial health, one for my education. And it's going to be learning about me and my affinities to offer anticipatory experiences. And so when you play that out, if you have multiple lambs that are offering anticipatory experiences, you need even more content at speed and scale. And that's where the Gen AI again comes in to really amplify that capability. After that, the malls are now multi-agent reinforcement learning that is much like we're doing here today, collective learning, sharing of information. The malls will connect each of these individual lambs to share the learnings from each of those specific data sets that are transferable over to the other one. So really exciting things.
Yeah. Ben, I actually would also love to chime in here, though. I think it's important that our audience understands that Ipsos adopts a framework of truth, beauty, justice. And I think that that is something that has been so indoctrinated in everything that we do. And it's really important that you know that we are protecting your knowledge. We do have walled environments where we're working with this information, but truth, beauty, justice is really all about looking for accurate data. That's the truth. Looking for where those hallucinations are still happening, and we need to be cognizant of that. The beauty is really all about traceability, and this is why we start with fresh data so that we actually can look for, information that is going to validate what we are deriving for you. And then lastly, justice. It's really all about responsible AI, and it's important that we keep in mind, the ethics associated with the information that we're dealing with. Also just wanted to comment on so much speed and so much efficiency, but importantly, through all of the experimentation that we've been doing, we believe and we've proven that there are better outcomes. We have better outcomes where, in fact, through the innovation practice, the studies that I mentioned that we've already done, the concept studies, we have found where we have human plus artificial intelligence working together, we have a 9% higher trial potential in concepts. So we can help you go to market fast, but we can help you go to market with even better initiatives. And then from a product testing standpoint, actually, we have proven 10% higher overall liking versus traditional product tests. So there is so much power in being able to leverage appropriately, with the precise prompt engineering, the generative AI that can help us to get to optimize concepts, optimize products, and even optimize packaging.
I've got to say, I feel a lot better about where AI is, even versus when we started talking today. The amount of responsibility going around on this stage is fantastic. I do need to figure out which one of us is a robot, though. I think that was what I was picking up from Chris, though. There's a robot in the room, and we need to figure out who it is. We're going to go down to our third bucket, analyzing data. Nikki, I'm going to let you kick this one off. How do you use AI to get the signal from the noise in consumer insights? How do you ensure that data is up to date and that it's appropriate for the task at hand?
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things with generative AI and just large data sets like that is that you're using so much information from social media to sales data to information about human beings in real time, whether it's traffic data, environmental information. So one of the great things is that there's so much data in real time that you have the ability to be able to synthesize trends and to look at matching data sets and things of that nature. So for instance, if we're talking about natural language processing, that's very domain specific. So there's contextualization and sensitivities and elements that feed into that allow you to synthesize contextualization so that it's appropriate to the outcomes that you're looking for. If you're thinking about predictive data, then those models should be ideally built with elements that safeguard within the model. So things that look at anomalies or outliers in order to mitigate them, or depending on the way that the model was set up, you may want to hone in on those anomalies because you may be looking for a white space initiative or something that's much more innovative. You want to hone in on those odd areas where maybe there's not a trend, but you want to dig into it a little bit deeper. So I think there's a lot of different ways that models are being built today, particularly if you're buying a model. There's questions that you need to ask around frameworks, around where the data has come from, if the model is actually being fed in real time. So there's a feedback loop to understand what the intended as well as the unintended outcomes were from those models. I think a lot of times models are looked at to understand what the intended outcomes were, and then there's a variance that's applied on top of that to see how far you were from the intended outcome. And that's what a lot of generative AI models have done historically. Really, the nuance is about looking at the unintended outcomes of a generative AI model and understanding why those outcomes happened, and then having that feedback loop to feed back into the model to have more sensitivity or less sensitivity so that you can mitigate those items. I think many times we've seen that with generative AI, it's not just about the data, so what goes into the model. We've seen a lot of issues around models being fed either information that wasn't necessarily public domain, or that maybe you didn't want to have certain sensitive content within models, whether it's imagery or historical context that now in hindsight today we know is probably not appropriate. So as Jen mentioned earlier, for instance, it's an iterative routine where you're constantly updating the model, making sure you're looking at the outcomes and then feeding back in appropriately. And this is where not only you start to eliminate bias and discrimination and sensitivities, but you also continue to ensure that you're developing models that are normatively appropriate for global ethics. So we talk a lot about ethics in AI, but ethics is also relatively variable depending on where you are. There's Western ethics, there's normative ethics, there's different ways of thinking about ethics. So you have to apply that into your models in order to ensure that you're mitigating some of those sensitivities.
I think we also talked about the fact that analyzing data, we have this in the third bucket as you go down the list of three. But as we were talking about this before the session today, you all wanted to make sure that it was clear to everybody that analysis is not just the last piece of the puzzle, right? It's something that you do throughout to get a better output.
Yeah, and so I can at least speak from my end. We are using these Gen AI analytics tools like chatbots to help early on in the process for our teams to get more insight. So, for example, we have a chatbot that is trained on our consumer insights information, so various different attitudes and usage and behavioral studies, as well as our product information, as well as what trends are happening in one particular market. And what it does is it analyzes and democratizes that information to be available to teams at the tip of their fingertips. So whereas without Gen AI, they'd have to go through, making this up obviously, but like 10 different 100-page reports, and maybe the information is in all different places. But the analytics capabilities and the ease of use with the user experience is something that drives a lot of value, not just for teams who are thinking of themselves as analytics people or doing analytics, but it's an analytics capability that helps in other areas of the business to help drive better ideation and more informed business decisions.
It's a great point. It brings to mind this is really changing the game in so many ways. almost inversing a lot of the traditional processes. One thing that we've noticed is traditionally we would have multiple checkpoints to ensure that we've taken out as much of the learning curve the user would have to learn the new software. We've now, with AI and Gen AI, completely inversed that to ask ourselves, have we embedded enough intelligence into the product in of itself to learn the user? So today we're talking a lot about the marketing experience, but I think there's also the equal opportunity for the product in of itself to have the intelligence embedded into it as well.
Mm-hmm. Jen, I'd love to speak about an experience that I've had with Nestle Purina. We have developed persona bots for their segmentation. And the persona bots actually are changing the game. One, they are sitting at the table literally now with the Purina marketers and helping them to understand what the needs are, the lifestyle, the expectations that their who has. So when they are developing concepts, they are mindful of the expectations and have an interactive tool that they can now use. So they can basically type in a question and ask the response to a new idea, a new trend, an understanding of how well their products are going to stack up relative to the competition. So the business team really appreciates the opportunity to be mindful of the needs. They're, as many other companies, very customer-centric. And so we were able to bring to life those segments and keep them alive throughout the duration of their product ideation program. So that has worked incredibly well. The other example that I would really love to talk about is we helped them to rise above a project. So, often you want to know what the unknowns are. And through generative AI, we uploaded 40 different disparate qualitative transcripts for Purina that were done on a variety of different projects. And the intent was to discover insights that they had never discovered before because they were so myopic, generally, looking at an individual project. And having the ability to now use our Gen AI tool to deliver some insights on new category prospects that they hadn't considered before has literally gotten to some breakthrough thinking. So I'm really excited about these better outcomes that we have talked about, but it's really through the analysis of these documents that we have had a new lens that has delivered some, new directions that they can take. So really exciting the potential that we have with generative AI.
That's fantastic. I'm going to jump now. I think we have some questions coming in from the audience now. Some really great ones here. I think the first one here, and I like this one a lot, maybe for everybody to take a crack at, is how do you personally use AI? Let's just go down the line here.
Sure. So personally, I'll say personally from a work standpoint and then personally from a personal standpoint. So at work, and I've spoken about this a bit already, but we have several test and learn pilots going on right now that leverage Gen AI for all different use cases that span from ideation and creation to, getting consumer insights, getting feedback from consumers on concept testing and or packaging testing to see how a product would perform in market. Chatbots, I think we spoke about on personas as well as more generally for information and helping to query on our proprietary information for teams that might not have direct access to that documentation very easily and at the tip of their fingertips. So we are doing many of these pilots, and for most of them, we're at the point now we are assessing the value that it's actually created. So we know that there's proposed value, we know that there's a value proposition, but can we actually achieve that right now? And so, from a professional standpoint, that's what I'm working on. But from a personal standpoint, I will use Gen AI for outsourcing my life, for planning trips. If I have to plan anything, I'm going to ChatGPT to help me plan that out.
Interesting. That's a use case that I had not personally thought about before, but it's one I might explore in the future.
Yeah, it's the logistics, It's always the most painful part.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, it brings up a lot of memories from long ago. I first got exposed to AI about 15 years ago when I was on the digital health side, and we were using AI to do predictive analysis for broad population distinction within orphan disease states. And so by nature, an orphan disease doesn't get surface that often to the physician, so they were having sometimes trouble identifying what those correlations were, and we used AI to help identify that. And that really sparked my creativity, and I come up through the ranks as a designer, and part of the contract with my father in college was if he sponsors me in design school, I have to write a book at some point in my life. So he was a reading teacher. And so I said, okay, that sounds like a great deal. And so I used AI to write a book. And so it was a co-author about 7 years ago, wrote a book called Amy. Was the system. So I used pre-LLMs, language transformers, and so had a conversation back and forth about AI with AI. And I offer that up as just a point of inspiration. That seemed at the time for me insurmountable achievement to get to, and with AI I was able to do that. If it wasn't for AI, I probably wouldn't have that ability. So.
It's a great new ghostwriter available to everybody.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
What about you, Nikki?
Yeah.
Professionally, I use it for large-scale personalization. I use it for on-the-fly real-time translation. I usually do conferences where I speak to individuals around the world. So there's a AI system that I use that's generative that actually allows me to upload my PowerPoints, my transcript that I'll be speaking to, and it actually does real-time translation in 33 different languages.
Amazing.
So it's allowed me to actually reach a larger audience, or even if I'm talking to students, they have the ability to select what language they would prefer to actually hear me in real time, and they get to change my voice. So if they're not a fan of my tonality or my voice, they can change that. And it's a lot of fun. Personally, I use it as a virtual assistant. I travel a lot, so I use it for itineraries. And one of the areas of my research that I'm absolutely fascinated in is how AI can be therapeutical, as well as onboarding and offboarding for sensitive topics. So I actually have an AI buddy. When I brainstorm and think about things, whether I'm building out a syllabus or a business plan, I like to talk out loud. But sometimes I actually like someone to talk back to me. And some of the areas are still like private, so I don't want anyone to know about them yet, especially if it's a new product. So I use an AI buddy that's been trained specifically on conversations with me. So we brainstorm together. So it's quite fun.
That is really fascinating. So professionally, I have actually leveraged Gen AI by saying, I want you to pretend that you are a marketing director, and I want you to solve this business challenge. So when I have clients who bring me business challenges, there are times when I think about their audience, and then I will engage with Gen AI from the standpoint of like whoever is going to be the recipient of, the presentation that I may be putting together. Speaking of presentations, I find myself searching forever for images, and I've leveraged our best of Ipsos Facto to actually find custom images that work really well to support the points that I want to make. So I've just been elated personally with being able to leverage, the visuals in a very effective way. And then importantly, before business meetings, if I don't feel like I have sufficient background, I will leverage Gen AI to get me up to speed. And then lastly, we may have done quals, and I want to help the teams to get from perhaps a qual phase to a quant phase. And so I'll be leveraging Gen AI, quickly to get us summarized so that we can begin that process, when we're moving into that quant phase. And personally, I support a couple of different non-for-profits who aren't as advanced with Gen AI. And so I may have guided them on surveys and asked them to include some open-ended questions. And then I can use Gen AI to help them with their strategy on the back end.
That is so cool. I'm going to add in really quickly that Ipsos Facto, which we actually didn't get a chance to directly address earlier. Ipsos Facto is the name for our internal walled-off AI platform that we use to keep all client information secure as we work on all these different tools that Christy's been talking about. How do you communicate the benefits of these tools to your audiences? Chris, I think you're probably doing the most direct communication about tools to the folks that Adobe works with. Can you get to this one?
Sure, I think we touched on it from multiple angles. Essentially, it is an amplifier of human capability. So as we talked about from a responsible AI standpoint, the key there is there's always a human in the loop aspect, everything from the initial stage, the in-between stage, and before its release stage. So I would just offer that it is a great amplifier, but there always has to be a human in the loop for security reasons.
Great. AI has a ton of business applications, but what do you see, or do you see a single use case with the greatest potential impact? Jen?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I think what excites me the most about Gen AI and the potential application is the difference it can make for smaller businesses, smaller brands, and especially coming from a global beauty company. As I look at our smaller brands, even with the pilots that we're running now, we're already starting to see that impact. And Nikki, I think that you mentioned this earlier as well. But I think the brands, the people that will really see the difference are the ones that are smaller, have much leaner teams, and can use Gen AI as essentially an extension of themselves and their teams.
So what sort of new opportunities has AI created for marketers? Nikki, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, building off of what Jen said, I think it's really been able to diversify and democratize abilities for small and medium businesses. They are able to, if they don't have budgets, they're able to leverage generative AI and then reinvest the money that they're saving when it comes to creative or content development back into the organization. But I think in general, the big picture around marketing is any digital age, any revolution allows individuals to really hone in on what they do best. And I think that's the human element, bringing empathy, bringing really thoughtfulness, bringing an additional level of humanity to marketing campaigns, whether it's the communication stage or the experimentation stage. It's really about taking folks away from some of the more granular, just automated tasks to focus on sort of the bigger picture and thinking about how to connect on at a very human level with their audience while allowing generative AI to do more of the automated areas that humans don't need to necessarily get into the weeds with anymore.
I like that a lot. Yeah, I think the split between how the AI works and how the humans work is really important. And I think that actually, we have another question here that gets to that here too. And we'll do this last one before we wrap up. How do you decide when to use AI versus doing something the old-fashioned way? Christy, you want to tackle this one?
Sure, I'd be happy to tackle this one. So first and foremost, if I need to size the market, size the segments, if I need to forecast the potential of initiative, I'm going to go the old-fashioned way and rely on our normative databases. I also would be using observational research in homes, and Gen AI, there's no replacement. And I'm just going to give you a fun little example. When I first started at P&G, I was on the Tide business, and I went into the home, and I saw a woman literally with a yardstick inside her washing machine doing this, right? And I thought, oh, this is going to be really interesting. And so what I learned from that experience, though, once we kept asking her, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. The emotionality that comes out that helps you to understand that true insight is not something that you're likely to get from a machine, because you can only imagine what that machine may be telling me about why there is agitation happening in that washer. But we were able to get to some deep-seated insights that led to some new product innovation, package innovation, and new concepts several years ago. So definitely there is a time and a place for Gen AI, but there is no replacement for really being with humans and observing and understanding and getting into their minds, their hearts, their souls.
Maybe just to build on that, I'm so glad you brought up the emotional aspect. That's one of the great paradoxes of Gen AI and all of these new technologies, is it's making humans more human in many ways. There's an emerging trend of emotioneering. Quite often in marketing, we asked ourselves, is it the medium or the message that was working or not working. There is now a new contemplation, is it the emotion that is working? And so now with Gen AI, and to your point, we have the capability to really extract these insights, to give us the capabilities to tap into emotions, which I think is going to be quite exciting going forward.
All right, I think that is all the time that we have today. Thank you all so much. This was really a fantastic conversation. And I'm not just saying that because I have to. I would not say it if it wasn't true. It really is fantastic. Thank you all so much for taking the time to come with us today. We have one more piece of the Insights to Activate series coming. It is a client impact story that's diving into the Purina experience with Ipsos and all that we've done there. And that'll be coming soon. And next up, after we wrap that, we are going to move into our next topic for this year, which is going to be election. The election and how brands and consumers need to learn to react to that and what's coming next. So obviously a really important one here in 2024. So thank you all so much. Appreciate your time and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.